Hi, I wanted to drop my opinions on Samorai. People know that I have a long and, well, not that long, but very, very unpleasant history between myself and Samorai. But what I'm saying, I believe, is objectively true, and everyone should be able to agree. And I end up wanting what their fans want anyway. The first thing to say about Samurai is if you were using that product, and specifically you were using it in the default way with the Android app, your coinjoins have been effectively undone. So that is the first and most important thing to point out about Samurai. I don't know why the supporters don't ever comment on this. It seems like something they're either, I'll be honest, too stupid to understand the implications of, or they're invested in not undermining their own reputations by having shilled something that turned out to be nothing more than a honeypot for the years that it ran. To reiterate, if you coin joined using Samurai Wallet with the Android app in a default capacity, without connecting it to your own node, for example, then all of your coin joins have effectively been undone. So if you withdrew from an exchange to an address in your Samurai Wallet, or you withdrew to an address somewhere else and then you bounced into your Samurai Wallet, and then you coin joined using Samurai Wallet, you effectively didn't do anything because you moved from an old address to a new address, both of which belong to the same XPub. And once that XPub is known by the authorities or whoever it is you're trying to hide this information from, then you effectively did nothing. You bounced from point A to point B, and all the obfuscation therein has been undermined and removed. That is very important to point out, and I need people to be aware of that because there's nothing more dangerous than believing your actions are private when actually people can see what you're doing. It would be much better to believe you weren't private, and then at least you would act appropriately. So anyway, Samurai out here now. They've just gone to jail. At least one of them went to jail yesterday. They have 5 years, 5 to 7 years, something like that. Or one of them is 4 years, one of them's 5 years, something like that. Not a great deal of time. And unfortunately, the state doesn't seem to have gone particularly overboard in, doing something way over the top that means we can declare, prosecutorial malpractice or, or malicious prosecution even, or any of those things that we could invoke to try and get them out. And we need them to get out for two reasons. So the reason they're in there is for conspiracy to commit money laundering and conspiracy to, or just the unlicensed transmission of money, unlicensed money transmission. These have implications. The fact that someone's gone to jail for those things, having done what Samurai has done, means that developers that work on CoinJoin software and developers that work on non-custodial wallets and all of their users are now somewhat implicated by what happened to Samurai. This is a disaster scenario because people were operating fairly well under the radar and not getting in trouble. It's always been a bit precarious. I know the Wasabi guys were certainly uncomfortable in the position they were in, and they had to compromise at various points along the way, one of which was implementing an OFAC-inspired blacklist, which I'll say no more on that, because people insist on not reading between lines, and I'm not going to read between lines for you. So the implications of that were not as bad as people made it out to be, but they insist on people painting targets on their back rather than just simply build tools and say, why don't you figure out what this tool is for? And placing symbolic roadblocks that might hinder a person's freedom if they were to not understand that the roadblock was only symbolic. I hope all that makes sense, but I'm not going to elaborate if it doesn't, so you'll just have to figure that one out for yourself. Anyway, it's my contention that people that have been making non-custodial wallets have come up against a bit of friction, particularly in the United States, which is what all this is about. And people working on CoinJoin software, not so much, but I know you can't use Wasabi if you're in America. Asterisk, but you can figure that one out for yourself too. The Samurai guys attracted attention to themselves in the worst way possible, because if you're out here tweeting, hey, Russian oligarchs, come use our software to do money laundering, it kind of feels like suicide by cop. Everyone knows it's a way you can commit suicide. Is it right that a cop feels somewhat above the law and they can murder a person who has done nothing illegal and isn't even acting suspiciously, or that you have no reason to arrest or something like that, but someone annoys you and you're a cop and you're freaked out that day and you shoot first and ask questions later. No, it's not right. No one should be murdered by the cops, but you can be if you really want, and everyone knows it's a thing. So if you're out here doing things that annoy the powers that be, and you're antagonizing them with your tweets and directing people to use your software in a way that can be all tied together to construct a narrative that says you are conspiring to commit money laundering, which is a crime. If you're doing all that stuff and then you get someone come after you for it and you get sent to jail for it, you asked for it, even if it is an immoral thing that ultimately happened to you. You don't get to be... I don't think that level of naivete is appropriate given the role and the importance of privacy in Bitcoin. Privacy in Bitcoin is genuinely a life or death matter, and people taking it and being silly and acting like they have infinite resources to defend themselves should the state exceed its stated boundaries, that you will be successful doing so. Because as we've learned, you won't be. You don't pick fights with the states. You don't pick fights with private individuals if they've got a lot of money and they can conduct lawfare against you. You can ruin someone's life if you want to, whether they've done anything bad or not. Just by annoying someone and making them dislike you, they can conduct lawfare on you. They can sue you and they can run up your legal expenses in defending yourself into the hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars very quickly. Very trivial. We've seen it happen to people all the time. It's why you don't go around being an asshole and picking fights that are unnecessary. You can only pick so many battles, and picking battles saying we're allowed to tweet about people doing stuff that's illegal with our software, and we're allowed to write our software, and we're allowed to provide the services, the centralized coordination that's necessary for it to work. We're going to do all that, and if anyone comes after us, we're going to say, it's just free speech, we're allowed to do that. Good luck with that is my answer to people approaching things with that level of naivete. And I don't want to be too condescending about it, right? It's easy for me to say all this now that we know how it goes down. But I was saying this stuff years ago when all you did, if you ever highlighted any of the issues with Samorai, particularly that one issue with the X-pubs, you just got an army of people attacking you, calling you a Fed. And I did this before Ocean was a thing, and everyone knows Ocean and Samorai had a beef, but this was before Ocean existed. I just thought, this sucks. Samorai is essentially, whether it wants to be or not, a honeypot, and people are using it like an important privacy tool, and it's actually undermining people's privacy. It's just providing a honeypot of people that think they're getting privacy for their UTXOs that aren't. And that, as I said, that's worse than if they had no tool at all. Like, go to the supermarket naked, steal everything with this magic invisibility suit. That's not great if I give you a magic invisibility suit that doesn't work. You would rather just go and do your theft, knowing that everyone could see everything you could do. So, and I'm sort of at a loss here. I've contemplated whether or not it's worth making a video or even taking part in the discussion around Samorai, because I don't know what to offer here. I know that they need to be released from prison for my benefit. Coin joining in Bitcoin is essential, and it's a way of preserving or acquiring privacy for your UTXOs. This is an utterly essential part of how Bitcoin needs to work. For basic levels of safety, it's got nothing to do with avoiding tax or money laundering or any of the other things they'd come after you for. It's just a basic precaution you take. You don't demonstrate to anyone you ever buy things from how much money you have. And that means more than just breaking off your $10 million UTXO, breaking off from that, an $100 chunk in the UTXO, one hop from that then you spend, when you need to buy something that costs less than $100. Okay, you can do that, but people can look in the blockchain and say, that guy that just spent $100, that $100 that he spent came from this UTXO that had $10 million, and go after them with a baseball bat. This is dangerous, right? It invites $5 wrench attacks, and coinjoins break those links, which make it harder for people to be able or impossible even if the software works properly, for them to come after you because they can't detect that you have that much money. I mean, there are other ways around it, sure, but coin joining is a way to make Bitcoin more private and shield yourself from people knowing things that that it would endanger you if they did know. So anyone working on this stuff now is in a more precarious position because of what Samorai did by implicating themselves, by deliberately broadcasting the fact that this software could be used for stuff that is going to annoy the state. They've now, and successfully being prosecuted for it, they've now made it so that others are implicated that would work on the same kinds of software, who have been more sensible and said, hey, here's the thing that makes your Bitcoins private. This is a safety issue. Saying stuff like that doesn't paint a target on people's back. This is why you've never heard of a massive controversy involving join market, because they're not deliberately out here running some sort of marketing campaign to stir up as much controversy as possible in order to make money. Because Samorai was very good at marketing itself in a certain way that made people think they were the true badasses in the space, the true way to route around the state. In reality, that was a trade-off that wasn't worth it because they drew so much heat by doing what they did. And in Keon's bio, it says he's going to jail for writing privacy software that worked too well. And there's so much misinformation and misrepresentation about what Samorai did and why they're going to jail that it becomes really hard to fight for the necessary cause of freeing them now. Again, I'll state my motivation in wanting them to be free is twofold. One is that I just believe convicting people of money laundering or unlicensed money transmission, those are nonsense crimes. They should disappear as a concept, and no human should be in jail for doing anything like that. But number two is that on a practical level, other people working on software that does, self-custodial wallets, nothing to do with coinjoins, or coinjoins, which is, as I've already said, are very important in this space for preserving privacy and for safety and security of Bitcoin users. On a practical sense, I don't like that the developers there are going to be somewhat spooked by what happened to Samorai. And in an ideological sense, I'm upset that anyone's in jail for money laundering charges or unlicensed money transmission. So for every reason, they need to be released. But unlike with Ross Ulbricht and the Silk Road case, where you can misrepresent things in a tactical capacity that kind of works, to the tune of, he just wrote a website and he maintained the website. He wasn't a drug dealer. I get that. You can drum up sympathy somewhat, but I've made another video on this channel about that. Everyone knows my support for Ross Ulbricht was unequivocal. I had no beef with Ross. I really appreciate Ross, and I appreciate his motivation to undermine the war on drugs. I agree with that. So everything about me wanted him to be free. I have no qualms about Ross. But I still question the tactic of simplifying what it is he's in trouble for and trying to use that as a basis for fighting for his freedom. Ross was not in jail for running a website. That's stupid. And I know this was said many times. It was said by his mother, Lynn Ulbricht. But at least that was effective at drumming up support from people that said, well, I run a website, and it's a marketplace, and if someone finds a way to trade something illegal on that marketplace, am I going to go to jail for it? Am I going to get a double life sentence plus 40 years? Am I going to have malicious prosecution? Reasonable question, right? You can cast some of that doubt into someone's analysis and make it a thing that implicates all of us. Ross needs to be free so that we have the freedom to run websites and not be ridiculously paranoid about what people might do on those websites. There's some argument there, and you can make arguments about precedent. But either way, I'm just saying that because I never had a beef with Ross, but I still believe that tactic wasn't correct. Ultimately, the tactic I believe that got Ross out of jail was the unbelievable contempt for the legal process in trying to get him sent to jail forever. And it's so obviously, it's so obvious that the government fell over itself trying to put him in jail that they violated all of their own laws and then the only thing you can do in that sense, if you want to look like you have any respect for the law, is to release him. And in reality, Trump pardoned him because Trump is an egotistical narcissist that was like, oh, the people that were mean to you were mean to me, therefore you must be a good guy. That was basically the analysis Trump did on it, I believe. Maybe he had someone else look into the case and say, yeah, this is full of complete violations of our own process and this is unjust. So the right thing happened. I don't know. I'm not going to psychologize too much on what Trump was thinking, but I was very happy that Ross got let out of jail, and I have no qualms about any of that. And I don't even have a problem with what he did in the first place. I don't believe any of what he did should have been a crime. But as I said in my other video called Green Camel Did Nothing Wrong, in that video I state very clearly that he decided what the website was for. He didn't just say, hey, trade anything, because he curated it and there were certain things he didn't allow people to trade, namely illegal pornography, and I'm happy that he curated the site and prevented that from going on there. That shows to me a decision that was made on his part, and he made the right decision. I think drugs and medicine, there's no clear line between the two, and it's up to people to ingest and purchase what it is they want, and it's not up to anyone it's not up to us to infantilize them with these stupid laws. So Samorai, obviously I have my beef with them. I'm not going to go into that here. I've definitely gone into what was wrong with their product because people need to know that, and their supporters, everyone with the hashtag Free Samorai, needs to be unashamedly pointing that out. And some people that have shilled their product for years need to stop worrying about their own reputational fallout and own it. People like Stefan Levara, people like Craig Raw, who incorporated Whirlpool into Sparrow Wallet, people like, I don't know, I can think of 5 or 6 others that have been telling people to use Samorai for years. You got people in a precarious position. You recommended a product that offered them very bad privacy. And the most I would ever see them do is say, hey, don't use, connect your own node if you're running the Android wallet. Otherwise, you run some risk. And it's so much worse than that. You cannot be mixing with people. I've already explained this at the beginning, but if you're doing coinjoins, it's as stupid as playing a game of hide and seek where you keep your eyes open and watch the person while they hide. That's Chomian blinding where the coordinator knows your XPub. It's completely pointless. The whole point of hide and seek is that you can't see where the other person goes when they're hiding, and then the attempt to find them is genuinely difficult. However, if the person coordinating the Chomian blind is aware of what your payout address is and can connect it back to the input you created, they didn't do anything. They just sat there on the couch counting, going 1, 2, 3, 4, staring at you while you go and hide. It's pointless, and it's worse than pointless because the hider thinks they're actually gaining something, and they're pretending that the person coordinating it can't see, and this is really important. So I would really ask all of the people campaigning for Samurai's privacy to stop making it difficult for us by evading and equivocating around uncomfortable facts in this, and own the fact that it was a honeypot. I'm not saying it was intentionally a honeypot, but everything Samorai did has created nothing but problems. It undermined the privacy of people seeking privacy. It charged them for the privilege. It pointlessly antagonized the state so as to make them come after them for stuff they didn't need to do, i.e. tweeting about Russian oligarchs and generally being assholes, thus implicating everyone else, creating freedom technology that knows how to stay under the radar and not pick pointless fights with the state. And now it's on us to get them out of jail, and we only have 4 or 5 years to do it. And unfortunately, because they created such an obvious breadcrumbs trail of things that they can be, indicted and imprisoned for, and they weren't so unreasonable with the sentencing like they were with Ross, that it becomes hard to find a reason that we can invoke for trying to get them out. So again, Keon is sitting there with a biography saying, or a Twitter bio saying, I'm in jail for writing privacy software that worked too well. This is very difficult to work with because it was the weakest of the privacy coinjoin solutions out there in Bitcoin, and possibly one of the reasons they were pursued is because they had that honeypot sitting there, the server in Iceland that contained people's XPubs, and the BIP, the op return information that kept metadata about Bitcoins is sitting there in the blockchain for everyone to see. So the fact that that data exists is why it was the weakest of the implementations and why you would motivate the Fed to come after it, the Feds to come after it. So it becomes very hard when we're dealing with that kind of misrepresentation to fight for their freedom, because selfishly, as I've said, I want Samurai to be pardoned, because if they are, that makes the life of developers that work on privacy software easier. It makes the lives of developers that work on non-custodial wallets easier. It makes the lives of people that coordinate coinjoins easier. And that needs to happen for that software to grow and flourish, and that software has to be successful in Bitcoin. Otherwise, there's no real other way of having privacy in Bitcoin. Yeah, you can use Lightning to make payments, but if you open your Lightning channel with coinjoins that you can't get any privacy from, that's nowhere near as good as if you can clean your coins in a coinjoin before opening the channel. So I am very motivated in the same way that the Free Samurai guys are, despite my history of being enemies, I will say, with them. But I can't work with y'all if you're not prepared to tell the truth about the implications of what's happened to that software. If you care about privacy in Bitcoin, you need to be yelling from a soapbox. If you were using Samurai with default settings with the Android app, which they claimed only 30% of people did, which is far too high, by the way, and I don't particularly believe that to be an honest claim. But those people are the ones most at risk, and they need to be told they're at risk. If you care about privacy, you need to be reaching out to those people and making them aware, not pretending it's not really a problem. So please show some integrity and own that, because this is if you care about privacy in Bitcoin, and there are people that tried to put their money where their mouth was and paid to have their coins joined and acquire some privacy that way, and you're leaving them high and dry when having directed them to use a broken tool, whilst fighting, because privacy in Bitcoin is important, to free the two people that made the weakest software in that regard, who have made our lives a lot more difficult. I'm sorry, your priorities are wrong. So please correct that. And it's not too late to correct course on that. I would have so much respect for any of the influencers that have shilled Samurai to say the worst has happened. That server getting confiscated means that if you were using the Android wallet with default settings, which again, just because they say only 30% of people did it, doesn't mean it wasn't the path of least resistance. Loads of people will have just downloaded that wallet, dumped some money in, and then coin joined. And it would have been so much better if they'd never done that. That's the problem, is if they'd have never done it, maybe their UTXOs just would have been left alone. But the fact that they did it means they specifically put their UTXOs inside a bounded area, inside a database on a server that said this person was trying to do something that they wanted privacy for. You've stuck a red flag next to all your UTXOs saying, come look into more detail into what I've done. It's an invitation for investigation. And that's so much worse than if you'd have just left it alone. It's literally like a VPN that's doxed and keeps logs and reports everything you do to the state. It would just be better if you didn't use it, guys, if you just used your normal connection with your ISP, because at least then you're not saying, hey, come look at me, I'm trying to be private. Like, if you walk out into public, in a shirt and jeans, no one pays any attention. If you walk out in public wearing a mask and a black cloak, sneaking around in the shadows where everyone can see you, but you think you're being incognito, people are going to pay more attention to you, all right? So it's that kind of situation. So yeah, please do the right thing, guys. And if you care about privacy in Bitcoin, it's more important than those two people. You need to make things right there. And next time, don't just dismiss the concerns brought up because they come from a competitor like Wasabi. I never worked for Wasabi. I never represented them. But the things they were saying about Samurai were correct. And everyone just dismissed it as a stupid, pointless feud. Oh, Wasabi versus Samurai. Oh, they hate each other. Israel versus Palestine. People say stupid things like that. I'm like, look, what they're saying is true, okay? what Wasabi said about what Nopara said about Samurai was accurate, and people needed to heed that. It doesn't make Wasabi without its own problems. And I was always a join market maxi anyway. Join market remains my favorite. So Samurai have to be gotten out of jail, and I'm asking you in a sincere capacity, because generally the people that promoted Samurai really dislike me, and I really dislike them. But I'm asking you humbly, first off, fix up and own the fact that you've been shilling a honeypot. And I'm sorry, if you can't own that, then you're not a person of any integrity. But assuming you can do that, we are then on the same team and fighting the same battle, because, as I've said, I need Samurai to be free. Bitcoiners need Samurai to be free, because the precedent of them being jailed over what they claim to have provided is damaging to Bitcoin. So they have to be released. But I don't know how we're going to get them out. Because if they were given 2 double life sentences plus 40 years, we could argue prosecutorial misconduct, appeal, we'll get you out of jail somehow, we'll raise money, we'll get you out. If Assange can be freed, and if Ross can be freed, then it's possible to free people when they are there for super unjust reasons. But I just don't know how to do it with Samurai, because it's not that big of a deal. They've only been given 4 and 5 years. That's not very much time. And the conspiracy to commit money laundering charge, I don't know how much of the time they've been given. I don't know how much of how much the money laundering charge is reflected by the time they've been given. Is pretty easy to demonstrate. Like, it shouldn't be illegal, but this is worse. It's Ross also tweeting, "Come use my website to buy and sell drugs. Screw the DEA." Like, if you're gonna do stuff like that, then how are we gonna sit here and say, "Oh, well, you just ran a website"? Obviously, as I've said, he curated the website. It was for buying and selling drugs. We know that. But he didn't add insult to injury by being an anon on Twitter saying, "Come use my website to buy and sell drugs, and I get a commission when you do." Like, how do you get someone like that out of jail? I just don't know how you do it. Because as far as I can tell, the prosecution wasn't that ridiculous. They didn't go that overboard. Again, if they'd have given him double life sentence of 40 years, there's something we can work with there to be like, that's unjust. You guys this is a kangaroo court. You're making an example out of people. But we can't do that. It's, Derek Chauvin is trying to get out of jail for the death of George Floyd. And you can see that was an unjust case. He's in jail for multiple decades for someone dying of a drug overdose, while he's in the process of arresting them and keeping his knee on the guy's shoulder or neck or something. But he was doing so according to the processes of that police department, right? I would argue that if someone is dying of a drug overdose while you're arresting them and you're not listening to them while they tell you they can't breathe, that you are implicated in that. And you should have noticed that, and it was part of your job to make sure you caught that they were dying. I know that there's extenuating circumstances. They had history, and the guy was messing around and being annoying and awkward and all that. But I don't particularly believe anyone has the right to make the police's life easier if they are arresting you. I believe that, what's that thing in Germany? There's no punishment for if you try and escape from prison, because they understand man's natural desire to be free. So, of course, they will attempt it. But same with cops. I don't think there should be a thing that says, "Oh, you resisted arrest, therefore worse." So I'm not like Derek Chauvin is the greatest guy ever, get him out of prison. But at the same time, it was a kangaroo court. It was a politicized trial. He got sent down for way more time than he should have. It was an injustice what happened to him. So if he gets released, I think that's appropriate. Samurai, again, I just don't know where the low-hanging fruit is to say that was wrong, that shouldn't happen, therefore mistrial, throw the whole thing out. They need to be released. I need a serious solution here, and it needs to come from serious people. And currently, the people advocating with the Free Samurai hashtag are doing so just on completely the most sloppy basis I've ever seen. They're not in jail for writing privacy software that worked too well. That's not the nature of what they're doing in there. Just like Ross isn't in jail for making a website. This is really dumb stuff. And it might work for rhetorical purposes, getting some support. But no one is going to back you. No one serious is going to be like, get Samurai out of jail because their software was awesome and they need to come back and everyone needs to use Samurai. No, we need to deal with the fact that we have some skeletons in the closet here. They were bad actors in effect. I'm not going to paint them as wonderful people. Just because you're naive about how you can say incriminating things and write software that does things that's going to make the state mad, that doesn't mean you get to go, I'm allowed to be free. That the free speech angle that they're doing is ridiculous. You don't get to say, I'm going to do some very illegal thing, and then that very illegal thing happens, and then not have it used against you because of free speech. That's literally not how the First Amendment works. The First Amendment does not say, oh, and by the way, if you're implicated in some other crime that isn't saying stuff, we can look at the things you've said and use that as a basis for proving your guilt. That's how the American legal system works, to my knowledge. If you say, I'm going to kill you, and then you kill someone, that doesn't, you don't get to say, well, I have free speech, so it doesn't matter that I said that. That's got nothing to do with it. In fact, all you did was incriminate yourself using free speech. So saying, come money launder, will make money when you do it, and then making money running a CoinJoin coordinator, writing the software that people use to interact with it, writing the software on the server side, keeping it all on a server in Iceland, having it confiscated, I don't understand. Getting 4 or 5 years for that, I don't understand how we're supposed to champion everything they did, because it's just so naive. Again, it's suicide by cop. Like, if someone gets murdered by the police when they haven't done anything wrong except be weird and confusing and freak out some rookie cop, some trigger-happy cop that murders them, I can acknowledge the immorality of that, but at the same time, no one I know that doesn't have a death wish is going to do that to the cops. No one is going to go and antagonize a bunch of stressed out, underslept, over-caffeinated, trigger-happy police officers and try and get themselves murdered and then go, oh, but you had no probable cause or whatever. You don't get to do that if you're a sensible human being. So don't antagonize the authorities and then expect everyone to rush to your defense without giving them a good reason. We have a good reason to defend them, which is precedent, but I don't know how I can go about campaigning for their freedom. And it's important. I'm not trying to undermine efforts to make them free, but I am trying to find a good premise and a good basis on which to fight for it. And again, I sincerely ask the people out there, #InFreeSamurai, to come up with some better ideas, because I would happily fight for their freedom. I would happily donate money to the cause, but I need to know what the actual basis for it is. Because as far as I can tell, they basically held up a sign saying, we are trying to enable money laundering. We're writing the software for it. We're advertising ourselves as people that will help coordinate it, and we are coordinating it. Oh, now we're in jail for 5 years having done that. It's very hard to fight for freedom of people that have acted like that. And so annoyingly, we have to. And I'm saying that none of this needed to happen. Like I said, there's never been a controversy with Join Market, and Join Market is the better approach anyway, because it's decentralized. I mean, fairly. You do have the directory nodes, which can be DDoSed, and then the whole thing kind of falls apart. It doesn't work very well when it comes under attack like that. But nonetheless, it's about as good as we can hope for in the privacy space in Bitcoin. So I don't know. Sincerely, the minute I come out with any of these honest thoughts about Samurai, all I do is get attacked. So this is a pretty thankless task, but I think it's important. We need to figure out how to get them out. And I don't know, I don't have a solid basis on which to campaign for it. So many people have written them off as, deserving to go to jail, and they don't deserve to go to jail. No one deserves to go to jail for money laundering or unlicensed money transmission. No one deserves that. Money laundering is always used to implicate other things, like you obviously have a bunch of money that you needed to clean because you committed some other crime, and we can use the money laundering as evidence of that. But money laundering itself and just moving money around without a license, It's completely unjustified to treat any of that as criminal activity. So morally, they just don't belong in jail, and but there are plenty of people that do because they're just confused by the fact that samurai seem to have a death wish, and that's now been granted. And it's very easy to look at that and just say, well, fuck around and find out. Like, if you're going to be that stupid about what it is you're doing, if you're going to commit money laundering and help other people commit money laundering and then go to jail for money laundering, then what do you expect us to do about that? And I'm like, yeah, fine. I understand that level of, just let them sit in jail and don't care about it. But the problem is, you need coin joining in Bitcoin, and coin joining is money laundering. And the precedent now exists where you're going to have less, and people are going to be less inclined to work on software that does that stuff. And that's going to be a downgrade for Bitcoin's privacy overall. And like I said, that is a matter of life and death in Bitcoin. So I don't know what the approach is here. I'm not a lawyer. I don't like Samurai personally. I think they are not moral people. I think they are dishonest people, and I think they created problems for Bitcoiners that wanted privacy. I think they were happy to take their money and lie about the implications of what happened, and you don't get to hide behind naivety for that. So when I say I want them out of jail, this is not a very comfortable thing for me to say. The nasty, the dark side of my character wants to be like, yeah, screw you guys, go to jail. But I'm not going to let that win, okay? I know that even though I don't like the guys, and even though I've come up against them in the past, I know for my own benefit, they still need to be let out of jail, and for everyone's benefit. I couldn't care less about them as people, I mean that. But their imprisonment is an injustice that is going to have implications for all Bitcoiners. So we have to work on getting them freed. But Samurai fans are some of the stupidest people in the space. I'm sorry, but you all are. And you need to put your thinking cap on for 5 minutes and figure out a basis on which we can actually fight for their freedom. And it can't be that money laundering isn't really a crime, because we're not going to win that battle, and we don't have enough time to win it. The only path I can see, and it can't be that they wrote open source software or they wrote privacy software, because they did more than that. They deliberately invited people to come and use it for illegal purposes, and they stated that, making it a very easy case. The only thing we can do is hopefully find some, again, prosecutorial misconduct, and that invalidates the whole thing. It needs to be some sort of procedural, boring, bureaucratic thing where we go, oh, that whole case doesn't work. And even then, I don't know if that would invalidate the precedent that has now been created by Samurai's imprisonment. And we need someone that can dig into this, and we need it fast, because they're only in jail for 4 or 5 years. They can be pardoned after they come out of jail, I believe, because it's still relevant to any convicted felon to be pardoned no matter when, because then they're no longer a convicted felon. So even if you're out of jail, you're a convicted felon, and that's definitely a second-class citizen. So come up with some good ideas. Stop saying they're in jail for writing great privacy software. They're not. They're in jail for more than that. Stop saying stop hiding the fact that their privacy software has painted a target on the back of people that used it. And find something real that with which we can fight for their freedom. Because there are plenty of people like me, I'm pretty sure the Wasabi guys would be on board with freeing you from jail. Because if Samurai get released from prison, Wasabi devs are going to be sleeping easier at night. I'm sure all the personal beef can evaporate after 5 minutes. And I'm sure no one is that petty and short-sighted that even though you've, done horrible things to each other on Twitter, that you're happy seeing them go to jail for something that you're also doing too. So I think it's very important that people see the bigger picture here and put personal beef aside. So yeah, no real advantage to me making videos like this and offering my thoughts, because Really, I mean it. The Samurai guys are so stupid. Their fan base are so stupid that they can't understand the kind of analysis I'm doing here, and they think I'm just attacking them pointlessly. I'm telling you, for the record, I want these guys out of jail, and I'm trying to find something that can stick with which we can fight for their freedom. And I'm talking about not making nonsense, sloppy arguments, saying, oh, they wrote open source software, and software is free speech, so you have to let them out. This is really not going to work, guys. You're going to only implicate other people writing freedom software by making such bad arguments. So if we fail, they're just going to stay in jail for 4 or 5 years, which is really not the end of the world for them personally. They'll come out, they'll be fine. They'll be convicted felons for a while, and then they'll eventually be able to reintegrate somehow. Fine. But in the meantime, everyone working on privacy software or non-custodial wallets will feel less comfortable. And as a result, less work will get done. And that's not good. But somehow, I will just state, to round off this video, if Samurai do get let out of jail, their software needs to actually work. Assuming they come out of jail and they start working on this stuff again, I find that very unlikely. Can we be a bit more honest about the compromised issues that come with using software that's broken like Samurai? Stop playing games of hide and seek where the person seeking has their eyes open and is watching you counting, because that's a stupid game. You're breaking, you're not understanding the entire point of playing that game. Anyway, thanks for watching, and please just have some integrity in this discussion, because if we're going to get them out of jail, then we're going to need to have our arguments in order and be able to present something that is a challenge to the powers that be, not sloppy arguments saying First Amendment. You don't get to write malware, infect someone's machine with it, steal their credit card information, and buy a bunch of stuff, can commit credit card fraud or anything, and say, doesn't matter because the malware I wrote is free speech and the First Amendment exists. That's not going to work, idiots. So stop making arguments like that, because if you're serious about their freedom, which you need to be, then maybe actually think about finding a proper argument. And the minute you do, I'll be glad to hear it, and I will use that as the basis here, because all I can see right now is the state tightening a noose around our neck, saying, haha, we found some guys working on privacy stuff that made it really easy for us to construct a narrative that they were breaking all these financial laws, and we can easily tie the whole thing together and create precedent. And now we have to figure out a way to fight that back, and I have no idea how to do it. We're dealing with dishonest legal apparatus from the start anyway, so even if we could find something, undeniable, they could just, flout the law in their own case anyway. It needs to be egregious. They need to have gone ridiculously over the top with Samurai. And then we could say, well, you guys, you got too excited, didn't you? Just like, COVID tyranny in Canada. They went so far that they inspired the trucker protest, and then the government has to back down. And with Ross, they went so far, giving him a double life sentence and 40 years, that eventually that just was like, all right, this is too humiliating now. We have to let this guy out of jail. We clearly overdid it. Samurai, there's just a couple of idiots saying, haha, we're money laundering. Fuck you, Department of Justice. Fuck you, Drug Enforcement Agency. And they're like, all right, you really want to screw around, do you? Okay, we'll throw you in jail for 5 years. Oh no, our freedom of speech. Like, how do you fight for freedom for people that naive and that I don't know how you do it. I can't see a route here. All I can see is us complaining about it and saying free Samurai, and people going, who's Samurai? Oh, they wrote privacy software for Bitcoin. Did they? Well, I mean, kind of. Actually, it was worse than nothing in some circumstances, the default circumstance, and we don't really want to talk about that because it means you're not going to support our cause for freeing them. All right, but do I even want them to be free? How did they end up in that situation? I don't know, guys. Nothing about this situation is good. Talking about it the way I am, trying to be candid, invites nothing but trolling and attacks. I don't know how I'm going to get them out. I don't know how we're going to get them out. Everyone knows that this has created a dark precedent. I just wish they hadn't been so stupid. I really do. And anyone that was like, guys, stop doing that. Like, I never told them to stop tweeting about flouting the law, but I did obsessively tell people, stop using Samurai, because either you are sharing your XPub with the coordinator, or other people in your joins are, which means they can, by process of elimination, unwind your coin joins too, even if you're not using the silly method they allow for. And in my debate with Odell and Zelko, because Odell's a Samurai fan, and Zelko works on Ronin Dojo, which is the right way to use Samurai. In my debate, his response was always, well, Samurai are obviously good actors, so you can trust them with that data. And my response was, it doesn't matter if they're good actors. They can be coerced. The server can be hacked. It can be stolen. And it turns out the thing I missed was they can also just run out of money defending themselves if the state come after them. Anyone can be sued, right? You can sue people who've done nothing wrong at all and just make them waste 500 grand in legal bills if you're rich enough and nasty enough to do it. Assuming that that can't happen to you when you're deliberately creating software like Samurai is so naive that if you're sufficiently naive, it's indistinguishable from maliciousness. And this is the problem overall with Samurai, is that you have to treat them as bad actors. They created a honeypot, they antagonized the state, they made the state come after them, put them in jail, and afford themselves the precedent-setting conviction that now allows for them to go after other people working on software that does what Samurai did properly. So all of that has created nothing but problems for Bitcoiners. And now, as begrudgingly as a human being possibly can feel, I have to fight for their freedom. And I'm telling you I will, but I'm just telling you fans, can you please come up with some basis on which I can do that isn't me lying to everyone? Because I'm not going to say Samurai are in jail for writing excellent privacy software when they didn't. Because I'm out here telling people that if you used it, you don't have any privacy at all. In fact, all you did was paint a red flag next to all of your UTXOs. All right, I'll stop ranting there. I really hope we can get something productive from this.